Okay, welcome everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Ron Levine from Mindfulness and Blue Jeans. I've been practicing mindfulness and insight meditation for almost 25 years. And I started during a time when I was dealing with clinical anxiety and depression and a raging panic disorder that had blown up into agoraphobia. I was unable to leave the house. I was on disability and happened to get paired up with a psychologist who, even back in 1998, was already several decades deep into practicing and teaching mindfulness and insight meditation. And this is what he offered me as a way of working through the issues that I was having. And I was not impressed with his suggestion. My feeling was I can't go out, I can't work, I can't do anything. My life is stopped. And here's this guy talking about, well, let's sit and watch the breathing for a while. Awesome. Thanks, buddy. So the only reason I even tried it was because he didn't give me anything else. I was sitting at home panicking all day anyway. I figured, all right, I'll try this just long enough. I can go back to him and honestly say, dude, this didn't work. Can I have the real treatment now? And like I say, that was almost 25 years ago. And I have not had that conversation with him. I'm still practicing. I'm teaching. So there might be something to this. And so here I am. And thank you for being with me today. Today's talk is getting out of our own way. And one of the things that I've found that's interesting about this getting in our own way, a lot of what I talk about in this practice, a lot of what I talk about in human psychology, life, things tend to be very circular. Things tend to beget themselves, perpetuate themselves, cause themselves. I often like to say that emotions beget themselves. We don't just feel sad. We feel sad about feeling sad. We may feel angry about feeling angry. Feel happy about feeling happy. Feel anxious about feeling anxious. Right? And I have found that this applies here too. I have found that we get in our own way by getting in our own way. Now, what the hell do I mean by this? I have found that it's in the attempt to get somewhere else that we get in our own way. We get in our own way by trying to get somewhere. I heard someone say a while ago that, some crisis came up in their life and say, I need to be Zen about this. Which I've dabbled a little bit in Zen. I don't know a whole lot, but I know enough to know that the most un-Zen thing you can do is try to be Zen. There's this myth about meditation that we are trying to be above it all. And this is where we sometimes get into things like spiritual bypassing. It's like, oh, I practice meditation so I don't feel angry, or I don't feel fear, or I don't feel this, I don't feel that. No, I practice, I'm spiritual, I don't feel those things. No, I'm above that. Okay. And I say right on my website, you're not going to see pictures of beautiful sunsets and, gorgeous models laughing at their salads on here. We're not trying to be above something. We're not trying to remove ourselves from something. We're not trying to get somewhere. Okay? These sorts of mentalities of being above it all, I need to be Zen about this. There are a couple of things that this mindset, that these phrases imply. Okay? They imply, first off, there's a me. And secondly, this me is in the wrong place. This me is in the wrong place. I'm in the wrong place. And how is this mindset working out for us? Well, here we are. This is where it's gotten us, right? We got to fair number of people in here this morning. So I think this resonates. I think we all have that sense of, oh, maybe here isn't working out so good. So let's look at a better strategy. Okay. I often say that in this practice, we are focusing on process, not content. And what I typically mean by this is we cause ourselves a lot of misery, a lot of stress, a lot of suffering by generating these storylines about ourselves, about our past, about our future, about what we want, about what we don't want. We replay these over and over in our minds and wonder why we're feeling stressed and miserable. And so one of the very powerful things that we do in this practice is we look at the process of how we are creating and spinning these storylines. Partially to simply see the reality of how this is actually happening, because how are we going to deconstruct and stop this otherwise? And partially because simply observing the process in itself is one of the first things that helps to deconstruct and stop that cycle, because we cannot simultaneously observe the process of ourselves doing it and be caught up in it at the same time. We can't observe the process of us spinning the storylines and be caught up in the content of them simultaneously. As I often say, we can go back and forth very, very quickly, but our minds can't actually multitask. We can't do both at the same time, not in the same moment. So what's happening here is we are identifying with this content, and a sense of self is arising from it. We are identifying with the storylines that we're creating. And it's like, well, that's me. I need this. I'm afraid of that. I can't do that. This has to go that way for me. We're identifying with our fears and our desires. Here's our me. We now have this concept of self. And this can get taken to even another level, to the point where we can begin to identify with the processes themselves. Oh, this is just what I do. This is how I am. Sometimes I like to talk about how in one of my sittings, I had a sudden mental image of this self, and I saw myself as this huge metal sculpture that I've been building since my earliest days, with these pieces just haphazardly bolted on as needed. Some of them are really old and rusting, starting to fall off. I'm trying to shine up this area. I'm trying to fix up that area. I'm trying to see, man, how do I get rid of that piece? I don't want that anymore. And of course, I'm carrying this damn thing with me everywhere, right? Showing it to people, but making sure they just see the good side. Asking them if it looks okay, right? Maybe seeing a piece on their sculpture saying, hey, where do I get that? So we have this feeling of self, this me. What begins to arise, as I was just describing with my sculpture, my big metal sculpture, is this shoulding. My sculpture, my self, should be this way. Shouldn't be that way. It needs to be like this. I need to be over there to be happy. And what we're doing here is focusing on effects. We're focusing on what we're perceiving as a necessary end game. And we're just looking at that thing saying, I need to be there. I need to be there. I shouldn't be here. The same way that we focus on process instead of content, like I was talking about a moment ago, the same way we focus on process instead of content, we want to focus on causes and conditions rather than effects. When the Buddha talked about karma, he's talking about cause and effect. Three main pillars of karma are intention, attention, and perception, and how we're using them in the present moment. So if we're using our attention to look at effects, just desired effects, what's that really buying us? I mean, that's kind of like sitting down at a piano and saying, I need to play like that person. And just sitting there and saying that repeatedly. And wondering why we don't. We can't. What we're doing is, I should play piano like that. My piano playing needs to be over there. And just repeatedly saying that to ourselves. Rather than placing our attention on the causes and conditions that might get us there. Might get us there. We don't know. I don't know. But we practice. Place the fingers on the keys. Press this one, press that one, see what happens. Start to get some of that feedback that only happens when we're engaging, again, in the process. And that's how we begin to learn and develop some skill. Focusing on the causes and conditions, getting our feedback, watching the process. Don't know what the effect's going to be. Don't know. In a way, doesn't really matter. It's going to be what it's going to be. But it's going to depend upon how we're dealing with causes and conditions, not on how we're dealing with the effect. Because we can't interact directly with the effect. We can't work with the effect. We can work with the effect as a new cause for maybe a future effect. But that's only once it's here. That's only once it's here. Is it here now? No. What is here now? Well, what's here now is the ability to work with the causes and conditions. That's something we can do now. We can even apply this kind of attention to process, to the processing of shoulding itself. As one of my old yoga teachers said, we should all over ourselves. All right, all this shoulding. I should be this, I should be that. We can actually turn our attention to the process of shoulding in itself. And that's what a large part of mindfulness and insight meditation practice is observing the very processes of mindfulness and insight meditation in themselves. Again, it's very circular. Sometimes that can make it a little confusing, a little difficult to tell how to get started. But it also has a way of self-perpetuating. So we're taking some of these vicious cycles, turning them into productive cycles. Taking our draining cycles and turning them into sustaining cycles. So we can focus our attention on the process of shoulding itself. And what I've found is this process of shoulding. This is an effect. Shoulding's an effect. So it itself has causes and conditions. And what I have found is the causes and conditions that give rise to shoulding is really about our feelings about ourselves, but also our feelings about our feelings. To bring it back to what I said at the beginning, we don't just feel sad, we feel sad about feeling sad. Feel anxious about feeling anxious. When we're talking about, I need to be over there, or I shouldn't be here, these aren't places, right? Unless we're really talking about, well, I want to live someplace else. But generally, we're not talking about places. We're talking about feelings. You're saying, I don't want to feel like this. I want to feel like that. Why don't I feel like that? I need to feel like that. And we fight with what's here. And is there any more getting in our own way than fighting with what's here? So rather than fighting with what's here, rather than demanding that here be a certain way, or demanding that we be over there, rather than engaging in this kind of aggression, this is subtle aggression. Okay? Rather than closing down like that, we're opening up and we're inquiring. Again, that person at the piano. Not the aggression of, I must play like that person and sitting there thinking that. The open curiosity and inquiry, the questioning. Well, what happens if I press that? What happens if I press that? What happens if I press that and that at the same time? Oh, and by the way, what's this pedal down here do? In a sense, you could take every one of those actions as a mini cause and effect. Well, if I press down this key, that's a cause and condition for what? Oh, there's the effect. What happens if I lift my finger up? Oh, it stops. But what happens if I press it down and press that pedal down there and then lift my finger up? Oh, it keeps going. Huh. This is how life works. What happens if I do this? Oh. Well, what happens if I do that? Oh. What if I do this and then I do this and then I do that? Oh. Folks, this is karma. This is cause and effect. And how different causes and conditions interact to create certain effects, which become causes and conditions for other effects. When I was housebound with agoraphobia back in the day, when I first started working with getting back out of the house again, it started very gradually. It started with just a walk around the block that scared the piss out of me. Over time, I started driving again, going short distances and so forth. And I still remember when I was feeling comfortable enough to start looking into starting to work again. I got a line on a company that was in Littleton. I'm in Waltham, Massachusetts, for those who are not near me. I'm in Waltham. And I think Littleton is like, if I remember correct, because I don't never really go to Littleton. If I remember correctly, it's up Route 2, and I think it might be about a half hour. And at the time, driving somewhere for a half an hour, that was a pretty big stretch. And I figured, all right, well, let me see if I can do this. And if this would be feasible to even continue pursuing this potential job, or if this is just not going to be workable. And I still remember putting on my sneakers and getting my car keys and getting ready to leave the apartment and thinking to myself, I don't know how this is going to end. Like, I may get there. I may not get there. I might end up in the hospital. I don't know. I mean, I couldn't envision myself making it there and being okay. So I really didn't know what the effect was going to be. I knew I could set this cause and condition. I could take an action. And I knew that if I never took the action, I probably wasn't going to grow as far as I needed to grow eventually. So it made sense to go ahead and do this. But it felt like walking off a cliff. You know, I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be okay. I honestly don't remember if I made it. And that says to me that it doesn't really matter. It's the fact that I tried it. And certainly, I mean, in the long run, I mean, going 30 minutes for me is a non-issue. I made it well past that, But that was one of those early instances of, I don't know what the effect's going to be. But all I can do is work with what's here. And it's that unwillingness to work with what's here where we get in our own way. So this is what I mean when I say the irony or the circularity of this is we get in our own way by getting in our own way. We get in our own way by trying to be someplace else, by trying to get somewhere. There isn't any place to go. There is no other place. There's only here. And how we work with here. So, shall we sit for a few minutes and work with what's here? Let's begin, as we always do, by imagining we are suspended from the ceiling by a piece of string attached to the top of our heads. As a nice cue to sit up straight, without adding any extra tension to do so. If you are feeling some tension right now, physically, mentally, emotionally, well, guess what? That's what's here. I often say, we don't need to try to force tension away because that's just bringing more tension to the tension that's already here, which, when you think about it, is a pretty asinine way to try to get rid of tension, isn't it? So what is that process but an attempt to be someplace else? To feel something different by force. Working with what's here in a counterproductive way. So when I usually begin these sittings by saying we don't need to bring tension to tension in an attempt to achieve ease or relaxation, that is a classic instance of how we get in our own way. Oh, there's tension here? Let's get rid of it by any means necessary. Okay. If you find a way to make that work, you figured something out I never could. So let's notice what is here. As it is. Maybe you don't have any tension right now. Great. Notice a lack of tension, a sense of ease, if that's what you have here. And if you haven't already, you may begin to bring your attention to your breathing. And the breathing is something that is also here. Attempting to force the breathing to be a certain way can be a way of getting in our own way. Oh, is my breath meditative enough? Whatever that means. Are we sitting here watching the breathing? Yeah? Okay. There's your meditative breath. Breathing the breath that's here. Not the one we think we need that's over there. I was talking earlier about how we watch processes in the context of the storylines that we spin, so we're not getting caught up in their content. We can watch the breathing process. This is training. As if we learn how to observe one process, it's not like we've only built the skill of observing that one process. We're building the skill of observing processes. So if we can observe the breathing process, just as the process it is, a bodily process that we can interfere with but do not have to. If we can observe the breathing process, that skill applies to being able to observe the storyline writing process. Now, do we get to say how quickly we'll develop these skills? No, that's an effect. Remember, we can't interact directly with the effect. That's a getting in your own way. That's an over there. We're working with what's here and causes and conditions that we can set. What's here? Oh, the opportunity to observe the process. That's something I can do directly. And see where it goes. One of the nice effects that I've found by building this skill is a greater sense of ease as I stop trying to control all these effects. And of course, like anything else, that sense of ease can increase and decrease at different times. So there's a little trap there where, in those times where the sense of ease perhaps decreases, I'll notice an attempt to force the effect of getting that full sense of ease back. And, oh, that's a getting in your own way. So as we build our skills, sometimes we start to find more subtle traps that arise. That's okay. We've been building our skill of building our skills. Again, circular. But a sustainable cycle, not a draining cycle. And just watching the breathing process is, in my experience, enough of a cause and a condition to lead to the right effects. As long as we do it with the right amounts of persistence, patience, compassion. And what are those right amounts? Well, figuring that out is part of building the skill. Again, pressing the key on the piano. What's this one do? What's this one do? What happens when I let go of that? Hands-on in the here and now. The same way we can watch the breathing process. We can see thinking processes, like the spinning of those storylines. Feeling processes. What we feel when we get caught up in the content of those storylines. We can see how the breathing processes and other physical processes interact with the mental processes, the emotional processes. All these causes and conditions leading to effects in endless permutations, and those effects becoming causes and conditions for more effects. This is karma. Again, it's also circular. But we have a say on what we're putting into that cycle. Again, the 3 pillars of karma: intention, attention, and perception. Well, what's our intention for our attention? Are we putting ourselves in a position to get that feedback that we need from our hands-on engagement? There's our perception. So we have a say in what we're putting into this cycle. And we get to see the effects. We don't get to dictate the effects. We get to see the effects. But only as long as we're here, not trying to get over there. If you lose the breathing process, you just come back to it. If there's a thought process or a felt process that arises when we realize we've lost the breathing process, like, oh, I'm terrible at this, we notice that process and come back to the breathing process. Simply noticing all of these processes as the processes they are, rather than falling into that identification trap I was talking about earlier. Making all of these things us. Well, that's just me. That's who I am. This static self-concept. I mean, if it's static, how are we ever going to get something better out of it? Like with the karmic cycle I was talking about. And one of the hallmarks of this conditioned existence, as the Buddha called it, where everything is based on cause and effect, one of the hallmarks is impermanence. Anything that arises based on causes and conditions will cease because causes and conditions change. And I've found that simply seeing physical processes, mental processes, emotional processes, simply seeing all of these processes arising, changing, passing, again and again and again. Just watching this is enough to generate a disillusionment. Disillusionment of what? A disillusionment of the concept that I'm a static self that needs to be in a different static place. Than the one it's in now. Because that self-concept and that place are actually what? Mental processes. themselves subject to causes and conditions and impermanence. And once we see that, the question stops becoming, how do we get out of our own way? And starts to become, what is there to even get in the way of? Thank you, everyone. These free sessions are supported by one-on-one sessions that I do with folks who might want to dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics, see how these practices may help them with something they're going through in the way that it has helped me. They're great not just for people trapped at home with agoraphobia, but maybe some more day-to-day stresses, work stresses, relationships. That's one of the great things about this practice. It's been around 2,500 years, 2,600 years all around the world, and it applies to the human condition. Stress and suffering, which are the effects of any number of causes and conditions, right? But it doesn't really matter so much what the causes and conditions are. It applies. So grab a look at my website if you'd like to book a session, or you can drop me a line through there if you like, if you have any questions. mindfulnessinbluejeans.com. With that, we can move on to what is my favorite part, which is hearing from you folks. So if anyone would like to share any questions, observations, thoughts. All right, Melise?
I've been trying too hard, and I have been through a lot, from cancer, surviving head and neck, and a terrible collision recently, not my fault. I'm at home with, going through whiplash. I found that I tried too hard, but at one time I could really relax. Not go away, no pie in the sky, but I would be like just very calm. I agree. I have gone through what you have gone, and misdiagnosis. But I know I have what Mel Brooks says: high anxiety. I've had panic attacks on Route 20. My first on Route 128 during rush hour, and I went off the road and I said, "Whoa!" And for a good long time, it took me a while, and I just went home. I am trying to gain back what I have not had for 8 years of worry. The mind just wanders. You have to constantly focus. And I don't want it to be unnatural to relax. So I thank you very much. And I really appreciate this. I didn't expect it this wonderful.
Thank you for sharing all that. I'm sorry to hear you're having such a difficult time.
Through it, but I'm saying don't turn 70.
I'll do my best with that. It's funny. nobody wants to get old, but consider the alternative.
Well, I'm waiting for wisdom. I know this will come.
Yeah, it's these things that you're talking about, the wisdom and relaxation. It's funny you say, you're not sure when the wisdom's going to come. You don't want relaxation to be unnatural and so forth. And that's just it. These are these effects. Relaxation can't be unnatural, unless we're talking about, using some kind of a drug or something. You might argue that that's unnatural, but you can't force relaxation. And that's some of what makes it so challenging is in attempting to force an effect, we are trying to induce something that needs to be natural. And that's obviously self-defeating when we say it that way. But when we are operating from a place purely of feeling, purely of desire and aversion, we're not using our logical facilities. And that's not to say that we can only operate using logical facilities, because Lord knows I tried that. We really need both. And that's a perfect indication of how these can work together. We need to have our ability to see clearly and logically that, we can't induce something that needs to be natural, that can only come about by not being induced. But we also have to feel our way through the process in order to allow the things that can arise to arise.
Sit with it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing all that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you found this helpful.
Oh, more than.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks so much. Cheers. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Ron. Nice to see you.
Good to
nice
see
to
you.
Hear you. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back.
Hi. Thank you. Just wondering if what you're saying about the cause and effect, I don't know whether that means react, for every action there's a reaction, but are you sort of basically saying kind of just do it? Like you just kind of have to just do it or just try it? Not as eloquent as you put it.
I can, if you like, I can put it even less eloquently.
Okay.
There's a common phrase these days that is usually used as a threat, but I like to use it in my own practice in the opposite way, not as a threat, but as a form of inquiry. And that phrase is fuck around and find out. Okay. That's what this practice is. Like, again, sitting down at that piano, experimentation, getting that feedback. And like you said, there is an element of just do it. That whole thing about I need to be over there, or sitting at the piano saying I need to play like a meister or whatever, without actually practicing. That's avoiding the actual doing. That's just wanting to, again, be someplace else. And to get back to what I was mentioning a moment ago, like with Melise, is how we progress has to unfold naturally. But how's it going to unfold naturally if we're not putting the causes and conditions in place for it to do so? And one of those causes and conditions is just do it or do something. Press that key and see what happens. Now, you mentioned reaction. And I do want to mention, because this is an important point, is one of the things that we try to control is our reactions. And we tend to fail at that. And that makes perfect sense in context of what we're talking about here, because our reactions are an effect. And we can't directly control an effect. But our attempt to control our reactions is a cause and condition. That is something that we're doing here and now. And that is a way that we often get in our own way. And we end up causing ourselves a lot of frustration and additional stress and suffering by trying to clamp down on or forcibly change our reactions. And it's another perfect example of getting in our own way. And the way that I found of not doing that getting in my own way was watching the reactions as the processes that they are. Because they came from causes and conditions, from how I reacted to things over decades. And here's the effect. Okay, let me look at this effect. But how I engage with the effect is a new cause and condition. So if I engage with the effect, that reaction, by observing it as it is, rather than trying to force it to be a certain way, that's a new cause and condition. And what I have found is, ironically enough, in time, the reactions do change. But it had to arise naturally. And I didn't even think it was going to happen that way, which turned out to be quite helpful, because it meant I wasn't trying to, when I started just saying, all right, well, let me just watch them. I just did it because, well, at least this isn't causing as much stress and suffering as trying to change them. And that was fine. I mean, that was a win right there. That was enough. Surprisingly to me, I found over the years that, oh, wait a minute, my reactions themselves are actually changing. The effects are changing based on the causes and conditions I put in place. I didn't get any say in when or how that happened, but oh, wow, it happened. Because I was working with what was here at the time, the reaction, and how was I working with it? Wasn't trying to get away from it, wasn't trying to be over there. I was just like, oh, what's here? So I want to mention that because the reaction bit and how we work with our own reactions. Sometimes that's a trap we fall into in this practice. Is like, oh, I'm meditating now. I need to change how I react to things. Right where I started with this, I need to be Zen about this. I need to be above all this. Again, trying to forcibly change our reactions. And that's how it's a getting in your own way. So I'm glad you brought that up, that reaction bit. I went off on a bit of a tangent. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. But I did try. I actually, the action-reaction thing, I probably shouldn't have said. There's so many different ways of looking at that, but I was working on my reaction to situations, and by not, like, let's put it, overreacting, or not acting, not reacting in a way that was just not helpful, like putting it off. That kind of reaction, and it is a reaction because I'm reacting, but I'm reacting differently. I'm
right.
not reacting. So that to me isn't okay. It actually helps me because it gives me time to consider, or it just goes away,
Right.
But yeah, the other stuff, I just find that the only way anything is going to change in my life is if I actually do something to change it.
Exactly.
And that's just what I was wondering, if you were getting to that point. If that was a little bit of the point that you were making about. Yes, I understand. Not just. I mean, I tend to be the person who's like, just do it. Not just do it. Because I have to like psych myself. It just takes too long. I just have to yell at myself and just say, just do it. For God's sakes, just go and do it. Because I start getting too anxious, and then I can't do anything. So, but yeah, you answered my question. Thank you.
Right, cheers. Yeah, a couple of quick things on that. One is for those of us, and I resemble this remark, who try to do too much. Sometimes what we need to do is less. I'm saying this for as a general, not to you particularly. This is for everyone, because I tend to be a high-strung type A personality. For me, part of my just do it a lot of the time is hang on, just get the lay of the land first. Take a breath first. Don't shoot first and ask questions later, because that's the tendency. So sometimes just do it is actually a doing less. Sometimes it's a doing less. The other thing I want to mention on the reaction bit, because I should clarify this, the difference between reaction and response. When I say reaction is an effect and we can't directly control it, I'm talking about the autonomic reaction, what automatically happens. Response, we have a choice about. And when I talk about how we can deal in different ways with our reactions, that's a response. So I want to make sure to clarify that for anyone who's confused about it. People may define reactions in different ways, and sometimes people define a reaction as the way I define response and so forth. So when I say reaction, I'm talking about something involuntary. It is something that automatically comes up based on how we've been behaving and handling things over the years. It's an effect of those causes and conditions. We don't have a choice anymore. It's automatic. How we deal with it, I consider a response. Something, if we have a choice, that's response. If we don't have a choice, that's reaction. So I just want to draw that distinction for anyone who might be confused with how I was using the terms. Melise, did you have another?
One question. Yeah. I've been sitting with a decision. It's taken me a year and a half, and I haven't made up my mind yet. I don't think I'm ready for a choice. And I said, did you ever mull something over for over a year? I can't make up my mind. It's a very hard decision at my age to make a change. Do you find change very hard?
Sure. That's what this practice is largely about, is when we talk about stress and suffering. Stress and suffering is what arises when we don't deal with pain skillfully. So I draw the same distinction between pain and suffering as I do between reacting and responding. Reacting, pain, these are involuntary. We don't have a choice. The way we respond to reactions, that's a choice. The way we deal with pain, we have a choice. If we deal with pain skillfully, we don't experience as much suffering.
I'm talking about emotional pain.
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, any kind of pain. Any kind of pain. A quick note on the decision piece. Some decisions they can take a while. Sometimes we could be engaging in some kind of avoidance. Sometimes it really is something that requires that much thought. There are two things that I'll quickly say about decision making that have always stuck with me. And you don't necessarily have to take these too seriously, but I find that they tend to clarify things pretty quickly. One thing is, if you are having trouble making a decision, you don't have all the information yet. That's one. The other one, and people may have heard me mention this on here before, and it's one of my favorites, and this one comes from Boardwalk Empire, anyone who watched the series Boardwalk Empire that was on a number of years ago. This came from the Jewish gangster, Arnold Rothstein. Arnold Rothstein popped out with this one, and it has stuck with me for years. He said, if you are having trouble making up your mind about something, flip a coin. When the coin is in the air, you'll know which way you want it to land. And that has stuck with me. And I have found that to be true a lot of the time. When I am having trouble making a decision, and I do have all the information, I'm not really having trouble making the decision most of the time. I already know what the right answer is. I'm trying to come to grips with it. That's what I have found.
Okay.
I hope those help. Thank you again. Yeah.
I wish you would write a book.
Maybe someday.
Why not now? My brother's a publisher. I'll publish it.
I appreciate that.
Oh, my God. Marvelous.
Thanks, Melise. Cheers. Hey, Judy. How's it going?
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
I want to bring up something I heard the singer Kelly Clarkson say to her audience. Kelly Clarkson was at the end of a TV show, and she had a studio audience and many out there in the, watching the TV. And she says at the end of her show, she says, well, have a great day. And if it isn't great, change it. And to me, meditation has helped be one of many things that helped during, say, the pandemic and the sadness or any type of sadness we go through before or after the pandemic. Not only that period, but just want to bring that out.
One of my old yoga teachers, and I always come back to this one, she used to say, do something, not nothing.
I like it. Yeah.
A way that I used to think of it in my agoraphobia days was I used to say to myself, consider the alternative. When things felt completely hopeless and I was just starting to be able to, get out of the apartment and just walk around the block. I still remember those so many days, or, when I did the drive to Littleton, or tried to, like I said, I don't even remember if I made it or not. It felt so hopeless. I was like, well, how's a walk around the block going to get me to the point of being able to work again? I mean, this isn't going to make any difference, right? And I thought to myself, well, consider the alternative. I mean, I can take the walk around the block or I can not. And I don't know where the walk around the block is going to lead. It's a cause and condition. I don't know what the effect is going to be. Of course, I wasn't thinking of it in those terms at the time, but it's the same thing. I don't know what the effect is going to be, but consider the alternative. I don't take the walk around the block. Well, I have a pretty good idea that's not going to lead anywhere. Is the walk going to lead anywhere? Don't know. But if I don't do it, will it? Well, probably not. So we don't let the lack of an ideal option prevent us from choosing the best one available. And sometimes that comes back to that thing about knowing what the right decision is, but we're really just trying to come to grips with it. Because sometimes we don't want to make the right decision simply because it's not the ideal option, but the ideal option's not on the table. And we'll sit there for years not making the right decision because we're holding out for the ideal that's maybe never going to come.
It's been very empowering to be in meetups with people saying these things, and meditation has definitely been, for me, a part of it that helped me, greatly helped me. It's not the only thing.
I second both of those. Yeah. Meditation has been it's the cornerstone of my practice, but it's not the only tool in my toolbox.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Judy. Cheers. I think we have time for one more if anyone else wants to jump in. Yes. Hey, Phyllis.
Hi. What are the other tools in your toolbox?
Oh, that's a great question. Other tools in my toolbox. Physical exercise for damn sure. Particularly yoga. On the times when I can't do yoga for whatever reason, and sometimes there are reasons, I have a treadmill, which I can't believe is still running in the condition it's running in for the number of years I've had it and how much I use it. So that's a huge help. I've been using Prozac for almost as long as I've been practicing. I started using Prozac about a year after I started practicing. I basically got my life back. But there were physical manifestations of anxiety that I hadn't been able to really ameliorate yet, like this constant shaking that I felt inside. And I felt like it might be time, because it was funny for me because of the anxiety. I had anxiety even of psychiatric medication. It scared the hell out of me. So even that in itself was a scary fuck around and find out situation. I don't know what the effect is going to be, but I felt like it was time to try that cause and condition. And I was very lucky. It worked brilliantly for me. And I didn't find that it so much, Prozac in itself would not have been enough. it didn't handle the psychological aspects in terms of like the habits I needed to change, though the stuff that mindfulness and insight meditation gave me, Prozac could not. But I also found that taking the Prozac finally calmed that inner shaking that I was feeling at a purely physical level, that at least at that point in my practice, the practice had not. Now, would the practice have eventually gotten there after another 5 years? Maybe, I don't know. But at the time, my feeling was, I think I'd like to add this tool to the toolbox and see what it does. And it worked so well, I've stuck with it. So that's a tool in the toolbox. Certainly things like community, doing things like this, talking with others, sharing my story with others is key. And something else that I'll mention, and some people don't like hearing this one, but it is indispensable for me. I'll close with this. When I became agoraphobic, that in itself was not something that was an effect. And that was an effect of many causes and conditions. But one of the chief causes and conditions was that I was trying to not feel discomfort at all. And because of my anxiety, being out in public places, particularly far from home, was uncomfortable, scary. What if I flip out? Okay. And I gradually stopped going out. You know, I made my circle of comfort became smaller and smaller, not just mentally, but literally physically, where I didn't want to go someplace that was a half hour away. I don't want to go someplace 20 minutes away. I don't want to go someplace 10 minutes away. I don't want to, until finally I was unable to leave my apartment. I was trying to never feel discomfort again. And my attempt to do so simply resulted in this permanent discomfort, ironically. And that was one of the things I needed to unlearn in the course of my recovery. I kept trying so hard to feel comfort by eradicating discomfort. And what I ironically found out was, in those first few weeks when I started finally getting out of the house again and walked around a block and walked around 2 blocks, there was a day where I needed to go someplace that was about 8 blocks away from the house. That was several blocks more than I had walked yet. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And it was one of those situations where I didn't know what the effect was going to be, but I went and I did it. And after I did it, I got back to the apartment. I laid down on the couch and I was just, whew. And for the first time in months, I felt comfort, actual, legitimate, natural comfort. And I was like, oh, here's the cause-effect relationship. Comfort is that thing you feel after discomfort. It's a very Zen sort of thing. There's no comfort without discomfort, and vice versa. So I realized, oh, holy shit, this is how I experience comfort. By experiencing the discomfort, not hiding from it, which just resulted in this happy horseshit. So I started deliberately putting myself into uncomfortable situations, which was very easy back then because everything was an uncomfortable situation. But as the years have gone on and the things that were once uncomfortable, they're now in my comfort zone. They're not uncomfortable anymore. I have had to continue to find new ways to make myself uncomfortable. And routinely, put myself in situations that I find scary. Not dangerous necessarily. For example, a lifelong needle phobe who now does acupuncture and has a tattoo. I felt like $1 bazillion after I got my tattoo. Why? Because it was fucking uncomfortable and scary. But it was something that after 41 years, I think I was 41 when I got it. I woke up one day, I was like, you know what? I actually want a tattoo. I'm scared shitless, but I actually want it. Well, let's just go do the thing. I just went and did a walk-in appointment. Just bang. And holy shit, did I feel amazing after that. And I knew I would, because by that time, I've been practicing a number of 15 odd years or so. I knew the cycle very well. I knew I was going to feel amazing afterwards. Blood tests scare the shit out of me. I feel amazing after I have a blood test done. And I'm not surprised with this. So sometimes people don't like to hear this, because it's that same mindset that I had of like, well, how do I never feel discomfort again? How do I never feel pain again? That's a getting in our own way, because it's impossible. Not only is it not possible, the attempt to do so is only going to have the opposite effect. So one of the biggest tools in my toolbox is making sure I don't get too comfortable. There is such a thing as too much comfort, and it will ironically result in discomfort. It's that impermanence again. The causes and conditions change. So yeah, there's at least 4 or 5 tools there in my toolbox, and I find that there's a synergistic effect there. These different causes and conditions interact with each other to create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts.
Thank you for sharing that.
Cheers. I hope that helps some folks. All right, so we're a few minutes over. I want to respect people's time. I will wrap it up there. So again, you have my links in the chat if anyone would like to drop me a line. And thank you all so much, everyone. Great to see you all. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you, Ron.
Ron.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.